This episode is brought to you by Farmers Insurance. When was the last time you reviewed your insurance policy? So it's been a while, huh? Well, no worries. My friends at the Austin Brummett Agency would love to hear from you and provide you with some amazing rates. Give them a call at 678-402-8262 or email them at abrummett@farmersagent.com. That's ABRUMIT at farmersagent.com, and tell them Harli sent you. Insiders, Inside the Bubble with Harli G is now sponsored by BetterHelp. As a partner of this episode, listeners can access the BetterHelp link located in the show notes to receive 10% off your first month of therapy with BetterHelp and get matched with a therapist who will listen and help. Go to BetterHelp, that is BetterHelp.com/inside the bubble, the link to get started. You're listening to Inside the Bubble with Harli G, the podcast for the superwoman. Every week, we connect with amazing individuals who share their inspirational experiences and stories while motivating and inspiring purpose. It's time to hang your cape. Grab your coffee, your water, your cocktail, and come on in Inside the Bubble with me, your host, Harli G. Welcome to Inside the Bubble with Harli G. I have an amazing person with me today. Someone with probably one of the biggest hearts that I know. I know I'm making him blush now.
Yes, ma'am, you are.
But I have Bill Howerton with me, and Bill and I actually work out at the Y. Close by our neighborhood Y, and so I've known Bill for a couple of years now, and I have to tell you something about Bill. Bill comes into the Y and he's so vibrant. He has so much energy and it just oozes out of him, and so positive, so encouraging. Bill is also part of the Red Table, which is some of our most seasoned individual, that's what I'm gonna call them, and they come in, they do their workout, they sit down, they fellowship with each other, and it's just amazing. But Bill is also a military vet and very a strong advocate for military veterans and individuals that have served for our country. And I wanted to bring Bill on to talk a little bit about his story, his experience, and also some of the things that he's doing and facilitating to help individuals who are impacted by having served in our military. And so, Bill, how long ago did you join the military? You're probably going to be like throwing him under the bus right now, but.
Well, first off, Harli, thank you for having me, and thank you for all the veteran support that you give us from the board members. Harli is a board member of the YMCA, and I'm very proud to know of her leadership skills and stuff like that one. But specifically to your question, I actually joined the military in 1984, enlisted with the goal in mind of just going 2 years, getting the college fund that they had, and then actually studying engineering and moving on into a private sector. But all of a sudden, I ended up in a commission at Austin Peay State University in 1989. Probably the story I like to tell most of all is I went back to the unit, 3rd Battalion, 35th Field Artillery, Wertheim, Germany, that my dad commanded in the 1970s. And so I was a lieutenant there, and my career took off.
Wow, that's your dad that's amazing.
So one of the stories about it is I actually had to draw down. I was in Alpha Battery, 3rd Battalion, 35th Field Artillery. And my dad, when you're in the command position, as a legacy, they put your picture up on the wall. I said, "You're not putting my father in a box." So I literally unscrewed the picture frame from the middle of the wall, stuck it in my bag, and my battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel James B. Godwin Jr. said, "You know anything about a picture being missing from the battalion?" I'm like, "No, sir, not at all." I'm lying through my teeth, and he knew it.
Oh my goodness. So tell us some of your experiences serving in the military.
I would tell you that I call myself a decourser. I did the lieutenant jobs in Germany. I did the captain's job at the 101st, and I did the major jobs in 18th Airborne Corps, and even here in Fort McPherson, which is where I will honestly tell you, Harley, my first deployment came into the war zone, Persian Gulf, Desert Storm. We call it Desert Storm 2. Mm-hmm. Desert Storm 1 was in the 1990s. I was actually a lieutenant in Germany when that war happened. I was also a lieutenant when that war ended 96 hours later. But I would tell you that it was very. I left my family behind. I was gone for 9 months. I missed Christmases. I missed birthdays. I missed all the stuff that most people don't. That's part of the sacrifices you have to do that one.
Right.
Would I do my experiences again? The answer is absolutely.
Wow.
Because it is a privilege to serve for your country, mm-hmm. and I love it.
Mm-hmm. I can feel the pride. I can feel just the sacrifice that it took for you to give of yourself. So we can walk around here and go to the gym every morning at 5 a.m. and not worry about our freedom. Those are things that we take for granted. And I always see you engage at the gym with other, military veterans. Like John is a military vet, amongst plenty of others. And I just see your interaction with them, and you I mean, of course, but they have a special place in your heart. You're such an advocate for military vets. What are some things that you feel like you want to continue to advocate for? Some things that you feel like we need to get the message out there as far as when it comes to military vets?
Okay, the big picture is mental health.
Yes, absolutely.
And not only just for the military, but for, I deal with school teachers sometimes. I deal with policemen, firefighters. Anytime this is how I say PTSD. You mm-hmm. see, hear, or smell death, it changes your life. And I don't care who you are, and I don't care where you come from. Mm-hmm. In the military, you see it a little bit more. And I will tell you, it's not. We don't talk about it because a lot of people don't believe it, and we don't.
Even people who have been in it.
Yes, people who have been in it and experienced. So it's called a brotherhood. And the reason it is called a brotherhood is because we know, and we don't exaggerate. I'll just tell you, in December 13, 2003, I went to an unblocked ambush after we captured Saddam Hussein. I was in Kuwait. We captured him in Iraq. And my bus that I was in got shot up. I stuck a 9mm out the doggone window and fired 9 rounds of a 9mm. I have no idea if I hit anybody. Most people don't believe that I would do that. And so I don't talk about it. Well, I do now because it's important, because it's closure for me. It opens people up. It shows vulnerability and things like that. But to advocate for the veterans, to get the word out, there's 2 things you need to do. You need to listen to them, and you need not judge them. Mm-hmm. Because what they're telling you is probably accurate. Mm-hmm. They don't. I mean, this stuff you can't make up. You don't know. Trust your instincts, as I do, and I love Big John Williams. Big John and I we're close because we're combat vets. He's an NCO and I'm an officer. And yes, we push each other's buttons, and poor Harli sees it all the time. We're like, what the heck's he doing? I mean, it's funny. It really is. But there are times when I need him, and there are times when he needs me, and we lean on each other as part of that brotherhood. Mm-hmm. And he's not the only one that I do that. But if you see a veteran, don't say thank you for your service. Say, how can I help you?
Wow.
Because you probably can help them.
Wow. That is a common mistake that we do all the time. And it comes from it comes from a place of good intention, because we see them, that we may see them in a uniform, and we're just thankful for what they've given, and we just say, thank you for your service. I've done that before.
Right.
You just were able to really open up my eyes. I never look at it that way, about asking, what can I do to help? What else can we do?
One of the things that I can tell, I actually write lots of poetry, and it's therapeutic. And I wrote my first poetry. It was called My Warrior in December of 2011. And I was going through a really, really bad time. It was Christmas. I'd missed my children, on and on and on. And I just wrote it, and it flowed. And writing helps me get my feelings out. Mm-hmm. One of the problems with veterans, and I'm guilty of it, we do not like to show vulnerability. Mm-hmm. We're this hard rock
soldier,
man of steel. We're not anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm a dad. Mm-hmm. I have a grandchild. I'm retired for 13 years and stuff like that. But we have a soft, feely side that not everybody can get to, mm-hmm. and we fight those who try to get to it. Mm-hmm. And you can't do that, boys and girls. You just can't do that. You got to show that vulnerability. Can you get burned? The answer is yes. Have I been burned? The answer is yes. Mm-hmm. But don't ever give up on yourself. But don't ever give up on you, mm-hmm. because somebody else, like your family, will benefit from that. Mm-hmm. Even if it's something you just don't want to deal with. One of the ways I deal with it personally is I write. I also do this thing called mindfulness. And it's nothing more sometimes but just closing my eyes, taking a gigantic deep breath twice, and just calming everything down. Yes, the emotions are still there.
Yes.
And you still need to break contact from the but when you come back to it, you can be objective with it. Mm-hmm. The other thing is seek mental health help.
Yeah. Professional.
Go. Yeah. And if you don't want to go to VA, which sometimes I go to VA, which is very unreliable, you can go to a private practice. Look for the person who has a PTSD certification. Because if you just go to a therapist and they don't have the PTSD certification, they probably can't help you.
Okay.
Although that has changed a lot lately. Mm-hmm. And your mental health is part of what I call the bigger picture called self-care. Yep. So I go to the YMCA. Mm-hmm. I see cool Harli. I go to a chiropractor once a week. Mm-hmm. I write once a week, or more than that. I go to a VA therapist twice a month, mm-hmm. when I can do that. I go to church. Mm-hmm. I do go to church, and I'm going to tell you, there are more veterans in church than you might ever realize. Yeah. And sometimes we talk about it, but there's a look that the veterans have, and John and I have it. Mm-hmm. Not everybody sees it and looks at it, but it's a check-in. Yeah. And one of the things I like to do, and I do this before I even start my workouts every day, is I just check in. And sometimes I'll talk to John, and sometimes it's nothing more than a big fist bump. It's hey man, stay strong. Yes. But it's a check-in. Mm-hmm. So check in when you do that, because somebody is counting on you. Yeah. And you have to believe that they care as much as you care.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I want to talk a little bit about your experience. So, how many total years have you served?
I did 22 years.
Wow.
I did 4 years enlisted time, and then I did 18 years commission time. Retired as an Army major in 2009. Much to the chagrin of most people, I turned down a lieutenant colonel promotion. I'm not going to serve anymore.
I'm done. I've given.
They were going to send me to Afghanistan after 2 tours in Iraq, and I'm like, I'm not doing this. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I knew that I was a different person.
Yeah, 22 years. So yeah, I'm glad you said that. How has it changed you?
A lot. Let me just kind of focus a little bit on the last 10 years. Okay. When you being America give me your sons and daughters to take to combat and to come back is a privilege. Mm-hmm. And I take that very seriously. So you have to teach, coach, and mentor that individual. And sometimes you're teaching a young person, sometimes you're teaching a middle-aged person, but you do it with a team. And my biggest fear when I was deployed...
Ladies, I know there's so much to do and not enough time in the day. Trust me. I'm right there with you. But what are you doing for yourself? Well, I've recently discovered Body Bar Pilates. Let me tell you a little bit about it. Body Bar Pilates will challenge all of your major muscle groups and provide you with a full body workout. Wow. Listen, I had to check it out. I took a class with Sherelle and it was amazing. They have workouts for all skill levels, whether you're just starting out or you're just looking for a new way to move your body. This is the community for you. Check out my friends at Body Bar Pilates East Cobb or give them a call at 678-941-4371. And don't forget to mention me, Harli G.
I was writing a letter home to a mom or a dad that they would never see their child again. So when you give me your child, I took that very seriously because I always said to my soldier, my job is to train you for war to bring you home. Mm-hmm. Now, did I know post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD was? Heck no, I didn't know that was, which is what happened to me. But the movie clip, Saving Private Ryan, at the beginning of the movie, when the mother hit the front porch, is very real to me.
Yeah.
It's like, I could have done that to somebody I didn't know. Now, I never wrote the letter. I was grateful that I didn't have to and things like that. But you learn priorities and you learn how to slow things down because not everything's important.
Yeah.
And so it changed me and it changed the leaders. And so I would always talk to my enlisted advisors and stuff like that. I would say, hey, man, does this make sense what we're doing? And most of the time they would say, yeah, do this. And the reason I talked to them is because I wanted the enlisted perspective. Mm-hmm. Because most of the time you can't go in kicking down doors and knocking down walls, which is really what happens. Mm-hmm. And that's how you get people hurt or killed. If you just take a step back and like, hey, let's see what this is all about. And that's one of the ways that I changed it. I changed as a father. Mm-hmm.
How?
A lot. Well, in the Islamic faith, a woman is treated like property.
Yep.
Okay? Mm-hmm. It's the way it is. And there's nothing you can do about it. And I have a daughter, and she is the love of my life along with my son, and you treat them equally. And I started to realize that they need love as much as I do. I shut myself down from that for a while. Mm-hmm. And then I started slowly, because Sarah and James saw a change in me. Mm-hmm. Dad, what's wrong with you? Dad, what's wrong with you? Dad, what's wrong with you? One of the hardest stories my daughter told me is when they moved to South Carolina. Everybody knew everybody's parents, and one of the kids walked up to me. I walked up to Sarah and said, "Where's your dad?" And she said, "He's deployed." Mm-hmm. And they lost friendships that way.
What?
Because they didn't know how to deal with a dad being deployed or something like that. They had never seen that. So Sarah and James were kind of by themselves and stuff like that. It's when you raise a military family, you have to know that you're doing it's a big sacrifice. One kind of an anecdotal story is when I moved here, I thought everybody knew a soldier. I was never more wrong. Never more wrong. I'm like, I walked into the YMCA and I had a uniform on and people were looking at me like I was E.F. Hutton, you know. You're like, what? And I'm kind of looking around and it was a little uncomfortable for me because but that was when I moved to Atlanta. I thought, okay, we got. And then I come back from my first deployment and there's signs all over the YMCA. Welcome home, Major Bill. I'm like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, okay, I get it. But I changed, and so I changed, and my children changed because I had changed, and it's because of all of the things that I had seen in the way children were treated, especially the women. Mm-hmm. And it really bothered me, but it is their culture. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to tell them that they're wrong. Yeah. Because you will never be able to convince them otherwise. Mm-hmm. Just like me. And so I learned to slow down. I learned that gift giving, material things, was much less important than giving your time and sharing events. So one of the things I used to do with Sarah and James, before my second deployment, we went down to SeaWorld. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I didn't give them a computer. I didn't give her a phone. Yeah. I went to SeaWorld. And we swim with the dolphins, and they have a little CD. This is 2007.
Wow, it's CD. Mm-hmm.
And that's the right?
Back then,
yeah, they don't have those anymore.
Exactly.
But those are the kind of things that I looked at events.
Memories, yeah.
Events that they'll remember because, you know, I can't remember.
Materialistic things come and go.
You know, the thing that I like is I can't even remember the first time I had a cell phone. But I'll never forget the SeaWorld trip.
Yep, exactly.
So I learned to do those kind of things. The other thing that it did for me is if you have time, talent, and treasure, share it. Mm-hmm. Don't hoard it. Mm-hmm. Because God will give it back to you.
Exactly.
2 times as much.
Exactly. I think that's part of purpose. But you mentioned you go to church. How have you been able to practice your faith based on your experience?
I'm Catholic, and I believe it or not, follow the golden rule: treat others as you would have them treat you. Mm-hmm. And so when I was deployed, and when I'm not deployed, or I'm in a place like Atlanta, or I'm in Disney World, or I'm in England, or something like that. My parents always taught me to remember your manners. Mm-hmm. Remember your manners, and it's simply saying yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. Be polite, be kind, be generous. Which is exactly what my faith is. And so you can take all those and export them all over the world to any individual that you want to do and things that go like that. Because I believe that people want to be treated kindly and with manners. And I get the same, well, most of the time you get the same treatment back. Yeah. Every now and then you get a rub.
You get a knucklehead, yeah.
Yeah, I get a rub. And then I just smile and I say, you have a nice day. And I break contact with them just like that one.
Exactly. Because I know a few individuals, based on their experience and what they have seen, they went the opposite way. So for them, they were like, well, how can there be a higher power? How can there be a God if you have kids that are dying overseas? If you held a dying child and a child died in my hands, I went overseas and had a child die in my hand. So how can there possibly be a God? How is that fair?
I would tell you, I've never held a baby that died in my hand in a combat zone. I would just tell you that if you ever experience that kind of trauma and stuff like that one, know that child is in a safer place, and it's a place that only God can take you. Mm-hmm. You can't don't be a cafeteria Christian. don't do that.
Explain to us what a cafeteria Christian is. I want to hear this.
Okay. I'll give you a little background. We call them I'm going to pick this, but I'm not going to pick this. The biggest one is the 10 Commandments. Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you go to church? No. You kind of got to go to church. Mm-hmm. All right. One of my least favorite expressions is taking God's name in vain. I will eat your head if I hear you say that.
Okay.
There are a lot of people that do that, but yet they won't go out and steal. Okay, that's called a cafeteria Christian. Okay, you don't get to do those kind of. You either follow all the laws, which I really hope you do, or you don't follow any of them.
Yeah.
But don't be a hypocrite when it comes to those kind of things. But you do that. Well, when you're deployed, you're either on a mission or you're not. There's nothing. I mean, and I really got to do my mission and stuff like that. And I will tell you that when you would deploy, 90% of it's boredom and 10% is terror.
Oh wow.
It's kind of how it works. Well, what do you do with 90% of your stuff? And I would talk to a priest, or I'd talk to a chaplain. We call them chaplains in the military and stuff like that. And I would talk to them and stuff like that. And the one thing that I would tell you is look at their faith. Look, there's a term the Catholics love, and I love it too. It's called ecumenism. It's the study of different faiths. Mm-hmm. We all have the same God, but their traditions are very different than ours.
Right.
And you have to respect that. Mm-hmm. But believe me when I say that most parents do not want their child to die, whether it's in a combat zone, whether it's in a safe neighborhood in the United States or any other place. They want their child to live and flourish. Mm-hmm. I have not met, there's a couple of people I've met in places that, it's just another child. But that may be 99% of it. But so I would tell you that if you don't believe in Christ, or the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and you've been deployed, then you haven't seen death. Because when you see it, it changes you.
Okay. You talked about, I want to talk a little bit about support system and what is some of the things that, what are some signs that we can recognize when someone is in distress or when a veteran is going through something? Are they signs that you feel like we can recognize to help them, support them, provide them with resources? What are some of those?
Okay, John and I talk about this, and I talk to a lot, but look, you have to watch their nonverbals. If they're not smiling, and they normally smile, take them aside and say everything all right. Don't just make them answer you, and if you listen to the tone of their voice and you look at their nonverbals. So here's an example, Harley. If I'm looking at you all the time eye to eye, and all of a sudden I'll look away from you and I'm like, everything's fine, that's a clue. It's not fine. It's the same thing. So it's like, are you good? That's when you say things. You don't say, how can I help you?
Yeah.
So watch their nonverbals. Look to see how they're standing. I'm hyper vigilant. I know you've seen this. I get on that doggone Peloton and I'm looking left to right like I'm a freaking clock. I can't stop looking around, and I don't like anything behind me.
Yep.
And Harley, you have seen this in me countless times, and you're going to see it countless times. And I'm sitting on this bike, and I know I'm going to save you, and I'm like, why are you doing this? You got to hear me talk to myself. It's quite fun.
Gosh, it's entertaining. It is, and then you'll be sitting there working out, and all of a sudden you hear whoa, and you're like, what? Oh, Bill's on the bike.
Yeah. So another way to engage that one is talk to. One of the things that veterans will reluctantly do is follow their family. So when you know their mom or their children, so your daughter comes home from school and say, Mom, how was your day? Well, this person, they're having a really bad day. First question you ask is, okay, was her dad in the military? And I walked up, there's a board member, and I can't think of her name. We go to church together. She's from Ohio State. She's an attorney, comes to the YMCA.
Shelly.
Is that her name, Shelly?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I walked up to her one day in church, and I said, is your husband in the military? Because she was always by herself. And that's an indicator. Well, no, her husband is a wrestling referee, and I'm like, and it embarrassed her. But I took the step.
Yeah.
So you walk up. So one of the things is if you know a military spouse, and don't be afraid to ask the question, did your husband serve? Because they fight the same gremlins that we fight, and they don't know how to get it out. So I would tell you, if it's the individual, watch the nonverbals. If you live in a community like we both do, find out who's in the military or who's served in the military, and just check in with them. And then the third way is, most of us have children. I'm an empty nester, but ask, to encourage your children to find out who the military person are. The children are. We call them dependent, which is a bad name. But and have them talk to. And if it gets really, the children know. Let me tell you, they know.
Yeah, they can.
They come back to you and you say, Mom, so and so is having a bad day because their dad's gone or this, that, and the other. So that's what I do. I watch your nonverbals. I know my neighborhood. I know everybody, especially in the cul-de-sac around me that serve and do the things like that one. And I'm the only veteran, and that's okay. But they all know I'm the veteran.
Right.
And so we look after each other, they look after me and things like that. But that's how I do it. Does that kind of help you at all?
Yeah.
And then if it gets, just talk to them. And do just, what are you doing for Christmas? What are you doing for Thanksgiving? What are you doing for birthdays? Because they're just normal people that have a atypical mission.
How do you feel how do you feel the military has changed you?
It made me grow up. Okay, you go from being a boy to a man just like that. And that's because you're responsible for men and equipment. And the thing about it, Harley, you have to build teams out of people you don't know from various backgrounds. And when you get that team right and it's clicking, I mean, it's a work of magic.
Yes.
It is absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's like a concert that nobody sees. And if you want proof, go look at Iraq, go look at Afghanistan, go look at Vietnam. I mean, those are some super warriors that did some super things, all for one thing: protect this country.
Yeah.
But the military changed me, but it made me a leader, and then it made me be a leader of people. And then when I retired, it made me get out of my community because I wanted to do things to help my community, like coach football, like help start the Cobb County Veterans Treatment Court to help wounded warriors who couldn't cope with their post-traumatic stress disorder, who use drugs and alcohol as an addiction to deal with it. It helps you get out into your church and become a council member or a finance person or something like that, because you may retire, but you never ever stop serving.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of how I look at it. So I sit around and look around and I'm like, how can I do this and how can I help that one? And it's all for the betterment of an individual. I started coaching football. And who did I run into? A bunch of military brats. I'm like, oh my God, man. So we get at it, and then
they're everywhere.
But this is the thing that bothered me. There was a kid, I'll never forget it. I called him BA. His name was Sincere. This is about 6 years ago. BA was 12 years old, and he was just frustrating me at practice. And so I looked at him in a coach's tone, and I said, go home and look at your playbook, and come back tomorrow. We're going to figure this thing out. The next day, he knew I was going to walk up to him. He knew
and ask him,
and say, what's going on? He couldn't read.
Oh.
He's 12 years old, and I'm like, what?
Wow.
So my world just dropped, and I'm like, well, Matt Dickman was the head coach at Harrison at the time, and he saw that look on my face. He said, Bill, what's the matter? I'm like, the guy can't read. Well, this is what happened. You find these tracks. If you can't read, and I didn't know what the significance of third grade was, now I know the significance. If you can't read and write by third grade, you're far behind the power curve.
Yep.
Well, then I started finding more people like that. And then I started finding broken families. And then I started finding boys that didn't have dads because they had passed away or they had divorced or something like that. And so I said, okay, you don't need to be their dad. You need to be their coach. And you need to just say, if you have a problem, and this happened, I won't use the names because he's a little boy, but his dad deals with post-traumatic stress disorder, and he and his mom were going through a really bad time. And the kid, there was another young man who slapped the guy on the shoulder pad, which is very normal.
Yep.
And he lost it. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I said, come over here, warrior.
Yeah, something else is going on there. Yeah.
Found out that his parents were going through a divorce. And we're talking about an 11-year-old boy. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Well, then you start talking, and I'm like, okay, well, what are you doing? And so I pick up the phone and I call the school counselor. And coaches know teachers and counselors. I mean, we just don't talk about it. And I call the student. He goes to school over at Lost Mountain, and I called the counselor and I said, check on this individual, and she does. And that's how I feel as part of my responsibility as a leader is helping people solve a problem and moving on. So that's one of the things the military taught me, to be a problem solver. And it taught me to be a leader. And I have no problem doing either one of them. And so that's one of the big changes. And then you apply that to your community after you retire, and you find that it never grows old.
Yeah.
Or you're never ever obsolete.
Wow. So you recently had the opportunity to, you're going to have to jog my memory a little bit, but you recently had the opportunity to go and talk to a group and facilitate was it a drawing or I can't remember what it was, but let me rewind. I'm sorry. You actually use a certain activity to help you with your PTSD. Gardening.
Yep.
Talk to us about that, and how did you fall into that? And listen, gardening, it is not for the faint of heart. Okay, everybody does not have that skill set. So I want to acknowledge that. But yes, we had a conversation, and you actually use gardening to help you with your PTSD. How did you even start?
I'm going to open with this really funny story.
Okay.
I watched a Home Depot video on how to do a vertical garden, and it took the video 10 minutes. It took me 15 days to build this video garden.
Oh, wow.
But it was okay. So let me backtrack. I've always liked to be outside, and I grew up all over the world, and you see really beautiful gardens, and you see really beautiful things and stuff like that. One of my favorite things to do, especially when I'm in Europe, I call it castle hopping and church hopping.
Ooh.
And they have one thing in common that churches
and castles
have in common are beautiful gardens.
Yeah.
And so you walk around. So when I lived in Germany from age 11 to 14 with my parents, and age of impression. And you see all these beautiful gardens, and I would talk to my mom and my dad about it, but my mom started getting into the garden because I started talking about it. Well, I like being outdoors, and the thing about gardening is it makes you patient, and it makes you concentrate on what you're growing. And so you have to read, you have to plant. I could talk for hours about gardening, hours. And you have to try certain things, and you try new things and things like that. But what got me more into gardening is I've always wanted. I saw this vertical garden on this depot, and I love to reclaim wood and brick and stone. And so there's a St. Teresa's Episcopal Church, which is on Mars Hill, about a mile from here, was destroying a deck, and I went in with my little green pickup truck, and I walked up this guy, and I said, "What you doing with this wood?" He said, "We're going to tear it down and burn it." I said, "Mind if I take some of it?" He said, "What are you going to do with it?" I said, "I'm going to build a vertical garden out of it." I have several types of herbs in my vertical garden that I grow every year, and I use reclaimed brick from Doug Suker, and I just kind of built all this stuff up around it. And when you start seeing things grow that you nurture, you just want to keep going. You just want to keep going. I learned about native planting versus which native planting is nothing more than taking what's around you and using it in your yard. There's a lot of people that like exotics. I'm guilty of it. One exotic that I really, really, really like are canna, because they're big and they're tall and they have beautiful blooms. They bloom all the time. But if you have a really bad frost or you don't cut them back and stuff like that, they can do that one. My favorite plant, believe it or not, is a daffodil. Oh. So I went on a daffodil. And the true warrior that I am, I actually did a yellow ribbon. Yes. In the middle of my pine island in my front yard, so the world could see that there was a warrior that was there. Oh, wow. And so I did that one, and I just let it grow. So I would do that one. So instead of having the auger that's using a drill like you use now, I use posthole diggers because I couldn't get the hole down. Yeah. But I did that all the way around, and now it flourishes. But when you start seeing the fruits of your labor, like herbs or vegetables or flowers or trees. Yesterday I was out pruning my dogwoods, trying to get them right and things like that. Gardening is a constant. It's 365 days a year, every year. And some days you do nothing but check on it, and some days there's not enough time in the day to do all you got to get done and things like that. But I got into gardening because it just makes me think nature. And it's beautiful, and I have birds and hummingbirds and all kinds of wildlife all over my yard. I've seen owls in my yard. There's a hawk nest somewhere in my yard. Marta's my next door neighbor Marta saw a coyote in her backyard the other day. See, it's okay. This is where I draw the line. It's okay. Fair enough. But if you garden, you'll create wildlife. And they'll come. They will really come. And I have bird nests that you can see up now that the leaves are off and things like that one. And the other thing that it helps you is it helps you get you out of a box, because you can think what I would call asymmetrically. You can do an asymmetric. So I was talking to Marta last night. She was so frustrated. She's a little 32-year-old mom of 3 boys. Great woman, great wife, great mom and stuff like that. But she's like, "Where do you get all this stuff?" And I said, "I just do this and this." And I said, "Marty, you got to try it." 50% of my gardening I fail, but the 50% I get right, I love. Straight up. Yeah. But I do the gardening because I can nurture it and I can watch it grow, and it grows with me. And other people can enjoy it. So when they come to my house, one of my favorite stories is I built a pizza oven. What? Yeah. I built the pizza oven during the pandemic, and my sister's like, "You're building a what?" And she bought me the frame, and so I went, and all the material, with the exception of the fire brick and the refractory cement, is all reclaimed.
Wow.
So now I have a pizza oven, a countertop, a big table for 8 people. And when you get tired with that one, I'm building a living room next to it, and I'm putting all the bushes. I mean, and that's what gardening does. Is so you can complement hardscape with landscape, and you can garden. And gardening is more than growing
just
vegetables.
Flowers
it's
but yes,
you got to nurture all that stuff, and so that's why. But Marta comes over and she sees it. My neighbors come over and they see it, and I bring joy to your heart because you see nature. That's why I like to garden. So I'll never stop. I'll try different things. Sometimes they'll fail. Sometimes they won't. It's okay.
Yeah. So you have the gardening. You also have poetry, right?
I do.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about poetry. And you got a group to do it as well? The poetry?
Okay, I'm going to back you up. I write poetry for me. Although this coming year, I've been talking to some people. I've never had it published because it shows vulnerability, and I need to take that step. I had the privilege of going to Mobile, Alabama 2 weeks ago, just before, it was actually over Veterans Day. And Tanya Butler and I met through some of I call them self-help classes. And Tanya asked me to come down and do 2 classes. One was journaling, which I do every day, and one was photo journaling and poetry.
Okay.
And the thing about poetry, it's you capture it at the moment or you don't capture it. If you don't capture it, it's gone.
Okay.
Versus journaling. So one of the things that I gave people a line, but probably the fondest story that I would tell you is in the photo journaling. I knew I was going to get some pushback on it. So I got a twin sheet. I said, draw a memory of something that you remember about this retreat. It was a kayak retreat for a weekend in Mobile, Alabama. And they drew these pictures. Well, mine happened to be a picture of a deer family as I was looking out over the water doing yoga at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. And I'm like, there's a deer family. And everybody stood up and couldn't believe it. Well, that was my picture and stuff like that one. And at the end of the day, I had these class at 10 o'clock on Thursday. Everybody had drawn on it, most everybody. And so I run what I call, the military calls a deception plan. So I said, okay, this is your photo journaling class. Come up here and describe the picture. And so I had 23 people come up and describe what they had drawn, and then we presented it to Tanya as our sponsor, for memory. Photo journaling is anything that's in your mind. You can either draw it, you can use a picture, you can do a poetry. And I'm going to kind of lean into this a little bit, but I actually wrote this poem. It's not a war poem, although I've got...
Oh, you get a treat today.
I wrote this poem. So, I love music. I'm an engineer by degree and the military. So I wrote this November of 2018, and it's called 2x6. And it starts, Einstein and Boston both rock the world. What dimension or genre is your voice? Do you rest or revolve? Create evolutionary or revolutionary change? How fast do you move? Is it E equals MC squared? Or is it E equals F flat? Show me. Collisions of protons and neutrons produce what key emotional trait? Brain retraining. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Light, life, energy, eccentric patterns of prisms, colors of blue, purple, even you. Constant and continuous rhythms reshape lifestyle changes. All souls to no souls. How does music define a loss? How does a touch, a tear, a smile? Flutes or fiddles, bagpipes and saxophones, trumpets or bugles, as drums blend all musical instruments unplugged. A 3-foot stomp, solos of baritones and sopranos lead to tears as 2 pair of footprints in a hidden sand reveal a secret story. Frequencies, vibrations, energies simplify life. Find stillness in a waterfall. Find light in a thunderstorm. Find noise in a snowflake. Whispers in the wind, and a peaceful world is yours. I just wrote that. Flowed just like that.
And it like you said, it represents you and everything that you are. So you said music, you said you're an engineer by trade, and you're in the military. And we were able to hear all of that in this passage.
And so that's the power of poetry, that you can do those kind of things. And it's, sometimes you have it, But every person has the ability to write. To be able to me, to be able to write poetry, you have to touch your heart. Or if you can touch your heart, there's so much love and feeling in I believe this, in everybody's heart. Sometimes you got to work through it. But there's a lot of love and there's a lot of feeling in a heart, because that's where the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are. That you can write that one. The single most important thing is you write it. Because if I wouldn't have captured that, it'd been gone. So that to me is a way of photojournaling. I've described my feelings to you through words, and hopefully it doesn't have to be a pretty poem. My very first one was very, 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 very dark.
Oh, but that's what you felt. That was your true emotion. You can't be afraid to be your authentic you. No, right? And so you have to be able to put down to describe what you're feeling in a moment. And then hopefully you see the evolution of that, right? So by putting it down, putting down that dark place on what's in front of you, then you're able to see, how did you move on from there? What did you feel in the moment? What were some of the triggers? How do you, hopefully put some tools and resources in place so that hopefully you're able to get better every time you see yourself in a dark place, or you are in that dark place. How are you able to put those things into place? But you can't do it if you don't write it down. You have to do it. Correct. And it takes courage. It takes courage for you to be able to accept where you are in the moment.
Because that's exactly right. One of the things that poetry has done for me over the years is I've watched myself change. I've gone from the dark away from the military to I've written athletic poems. I've written those kind of poems and stuff like that. It just opened, but you see your growth through your writing, and it's very, very powerful.
Yeah.
And the more you write, the more detailed you become. And then you get to share it. I found a diary of my grandmother.
Wow.
A long time ago, and I was reading it, and she read and wrote the same way I read and write and things like that. But you could see how she was growing, and you could see her concerns.
Yes.
As a mom, as a wife, you could see her concern with the community. Or you could see her joys. I'm starting to open up to that now, where it used to be. This is my day, but now it's like, if I don't thank God 3 times in a day in my journal, I'm doing something wrong. But those are the kind of things that poetry helps me with. Is that it gives. I expose my vulnerability to you, so you can see who I am. It's not a mirror.
See beyond the surface, right?
It's not a mirror.
Yes,
because you're not looking at yourself. You're looking at me.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at you. And feedback to me is very, very important. I think people, especially children, especially football players and soccer players, they love feedback. Coach, am I doing it right? No, do it this way. Or let me make it a little bit better and things like that one. Poetry does the same thing. I don't have a person that I follow. I've never opened up a poetry. I was never taught poetry. I never learned it in school at any level, at anything. Just one day, I just opened up my piece of paper and I wrote it, and it came. If you'd told me I'd have been writing poetry at 55 years old, I'd have said no way. If you'd told me I'd have been dealing with the Veterans Treatment Court at 55, I'd have told you no way, because I don't have a law degree. I'm not any interest in that one. But I followed my heart, and I found that joy. Although sometimes it's not so joyful.
No, we all have those places within us. So how, if you can,
sure.
Was there a time when you were in a dark place, and what did you do to help you, or what happened? Maybe it wasn't something that you did specifically. Maybe it was somebody that just came along on your journey that helped you through that. But I think it's important to recognize when we are in those places, because those places are just as much part of us Was there a time you were in a dark place, and how did you get out of it?
I'll tell you two very long stories. The first one was I didn't know what PTSD was. I had just recently retired. I lost the structure. I lost my chain of command. I lost people that I could talk to. That happens to everybody, whether you're a veteran or a retiree. And I don't care who you are or where you come from. And I knew I was struggling, but I couldn't figure out what was going on. And this was 2009. And I'm like, I can't live like this and stuff like that. And so there was, I was on my iPad and I saw some veterans struggling. And the article was, believe it or not, the Veterans Treatment Court up in Virginia. And I was reading it and somehow a number came across it. And I'm like, let me just call this number. It happened to be the Vet Center down on 40 Dodge Street. And the woman that I talked to was Dr. Judith Samuel. And Doc Samuel used to be a dancer, a barway dancer up in New York, but knew mental health and stuff like that. And she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "No, I'm not okay." Well,
so when you say you're not okay, what were some of the thoughts you were having?
Okay, I was going through a suicide ideation.
Got it.
I mean, if I had a weapon, I'd stuck it right up under my chin and pulled the trigger because it was just so. It was just awful. Mm-hmm. I did that later, and I'll come back to that one in 2013. Mm-hmm. But Doc Samuel called me and said, "Why don't you come see me?" And I said, "Okay, well, where are you? And tell me what you do and stuff like that." And she was on part of that helpline. And we got through the moment, and she calmed me down over the phone, and I went to see her. Mm-hmm. And that's when I had the first, I realized that there were more resources out there than I had from the Veterans Affairs. Mm-hmm. It was a mental health clinic for people like me that could help me readjust my life to the community. And so Doc Samuel did that for me. But the thing that I learned about it is I was one of the few officers that went through and did it. Mm-hmm. And she found that to be very encouraging, but I was teaching her as much about military officers than she was teaching. Yes. So we found a blend. So like I got that team. Mm-hmm. So I called us a team of one and we blended. And then she opened up some other rooms, but I continued to find myself kind of alone because I was the only officer. Yeah. And in the military and in veterans, they still follow a chain of command. So when I went when I was down in Mobile 3 weeks ago, they all figured out I was a senior guy. They still call me sir. The chain of command was no, I don't want that. But we still follow that chain of command, which is
it's very ingrained.
Yes, I mean it's who we are. Yeah, that's how we problem. And so we got through that one, and she started giving me time and effort. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, I'll be okay. Mm-hmm. The next story, I was at the football field and I was coaching. I just started, and this is a taboo that civilians, you should never ask a veteran ever. Mm-hmm. And this coach looked up to me in front of all these players, and Harli, it shook me to the core. He said, "How many people did you lose in war?" Oh man! And my eyes got bigger than a planet, and everything in my face just changed. And one of my coaches saw me, and he ran to me and latched onto me and pulled me away. Mm-hmm. And he said, "You okay?" I'm like, "No, I'm not." And he said, "Just walk around." He never left me. He was a civilian and stuff like that. And then 15 minutes later, one of my players said, "How many people did you kill?" I'm like, "What?" I was like, it was
what is happening that day? Okay.
So I walked in. I said, "I'm going home." Mm-hmm. And I called Doc Samuel. And I'm like, "Dude, Bill, what's the matter?" I'm like, "Everybody's asking me all these crazy questions." She said, "How do you feel?" I said, "I'm ready to take my life." Oh, man. She's like, "Bill," no. Okay, please don't ask a veteran how many people they've killed, and don't ask how many people they've lost. Mm-hmm. Don't do it. They'll tell you if they want to. If they don't push it, because that will bring more horror to them than you can possibly imagine. Yeah. And it happened to me twice within 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what the heck? Yeah. That was a true test of faith. Yes. Honest to God that it was. Okay. So I would tell you that I pulled through, and I still pull through with a lot of treatment. And I do a lot of treatment, a lot of mental health treatment, things like that one. But those are December of 2011 when I wrote my first poem about my warriors. The first time I introduced myself to poetry, and it was dark, and it was, we find peace in chaos, and it just goes on. And hell, I mean, what is heaven and hell when you're in combat? I can't tell you.
Oh.
But it's there.
Yeah.
But you can't see it.
Yeah.
And so those are the kind of things that you write in your poetry and stuff like that one. But I go back and I look at some of the things, and I've learned to be a lot more concise with my poetry. I've learned a lot versus just writing forever.
Yeah. Which might help.
It does.
Yes.
One of my fondest stories was, I called it Echoes. And Echo was written, I wrote it for my dad and me. Because we were both in 2 different wars. But we found the drum beat the same.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
And he led soldiers in Vietnam. I led soldiers in Iraq. My brother led soldiers in Iraq and stuff like that. It's all the same.
Yeah, it is.
And so when you sit there and you do that one, and then you come home, and one of the things that was very traumatic for me is I got to be able to really do my mission when I was deployed. But then all of a sudden, you're a dad again, you're a husband again, you're back.
But you have all this with you, right?
And so your children or your wife calls you, go by and pick up Johnny at school.
Yeah.
And you're not thinking that.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, wait a minute. I'm at work. When is school out? You start racing through your mind. And then you have what they call distractors and stuff like that one. And they literally overwhelmed me.
Just simple things.
I mean, so everything I can do now is like, my next door neighbor said, Bill, can you take my son to school? I said, sure. If you'd asked me that 5, 10 years ago, I would have struggled because it's like, what do you mean taking to school? What do you want me to do? What times do you have to be there? Instead of just kind of flowing with it. And poetry and journaling has slowed me down enough to say, this is what's really important. And believe me, boys and girls, you are important.
Yes. Yeah. This is crazy, Bill, but we're we're coming to the end.
Okay.
I like to ask this question to everyone that comes on the pod because it is the foundation of the podcast. But I always ask a question about purpose. And how do you feel like what you're doing right now plays a role into your purpose?
If I am not helping an individual, I am not fulfilling my mission. If it's nothing more than listening to that person, that's the purpose. If it means coming to Harli's podcast and talking to try to help out my wounded warriors who are out there, and boys and girls, I know you're out there.
Yes.
I know you are.
Yep.
That is a big mission. Nothing that I do, and there's many people will support this, that say there's nothing Bill does that does not have a purpose.
Absolutely. I can vouch for that.
So, sometimes it's just a smile. Sometimes it's a fist bump. Sometimes it's, Bill, I got a big problem. Let's sit down and let's talk about this. Yep.
And Bill is the type of guy that he'll do everything within his power to help you. And I truly appreciate that. I think we actually mentioned Bill in the gym episode, and we were like, he's that guy whose heart is so big that you're just kind of like, wow, just it blows our mind. So we thank you. We thank you for all of the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Constantly in the community, helping military veterans. The resources, your resource. He's so knowledgeable. He'll point you in the right direction. So we want to thank you for that. I'm not going to say thank you for your service. I learned something today. But anything I can help, whether it's putting on resources on a podcast, being that sounding board, we will do it. I want to thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your story and being vulnerable. And I really appreciate it. And I do feel like when I look at you and your energy when you come into the gym every morning, I'm like, this is a man that's walking in his purpose. So I really appreciate that.
Okay, so let me give you a challenge.
Okay.
Okay, I always leave with a challenge. Somebody told me I always give somebody homework.
Yes.
Try to find, and I can absolutely help you find it. Find a military family and interview them and say, how has the community helped you, or how whatever you want to do, and I'm happy to pick on Big John for you.
I actually, believe it or not, is actually have a military family that's coming on a pod.
There you go, good girl.
So they are coming. I'm really excited to talk to them. Okay. So that's coming soon. That's actually already scheduled. So yeah. So look at that. I'm actually ahead of Bill for once.
Thank you. You're more on the way.
Exactly. But that's it. That's all we have today. We drop new episodes every week, every Monday. Okay. We have amazing individuals like Bill that come onto the podcast and talk about their purpose and have motivational and inspirational stories to tell you all that this is a community. The whole premise of the podcast is that we're building this community, helping, supporting each other, because trust me, you're not the only one that's going through what you're going through. Somebody else has been through it. And that's why I always say in my handle is there's purpose in your story. Whatever that experience is, whatever that story is, there's a purpose in it. Follow, like, share. We are on social media. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. Engage with us. Drop us a heart emoji. Let us know what you thought about the episode. We would love to hear from you. And as I always say, just mentioned, there's purpose in your story. I hope you enjoyed our show today. Hit the subscribe button and share. Share this pod with your family, with your friends, with your girlfriends. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Inside the Bubble with HG. Keep the conversation going. Drop us a heart emoji. Engage with us. We would love to hear from you. New episodes are dropping every Monday on your podcast streaming platforms. And remember, there's purpose in your story.